Apple still in the spotlight 2 days after opposing court orders to unlock the iPhone of the San Bernardino shooter Syed Farook. Reaction from the tech industry has been muted, with calls for more debate and statements of broad agreement that companies shouldn't be forced to create so-called backdoors in their products. Google CEO Sundar Pichai tweeted, "Forcing companies to enable hacking could compromise privacy and set a troubling precedent." Facebook-owned WhatsApp CEO Yang Koum also publicly supported Tim Cook, but Facebook, the company, Amazon, Microsoft, and Twitter declined to comment. Is Apple's stand putting other tech companies in an uncomfortable situation? Many companies, while publicly aligning themselves with Apple, do in fact comply with official requests for information. I put this question to Hiroshi Lockheimer, Google Senior Vice President of Android, asking him what he would have done if the gunman's phone had been an Android instead of an iPhone.
Obviously, we focus on building really secure products, but if requested or demanded by law agencies, of course, based on proper legal process, we will make information available to them. But I think what we're talking about here is a completely different scenario where we're being, or the tech industry, I guess, in this case Apple, is being asked, it sounds like, they're being asked to help in hacking their product. I think that's a very different scenario from sort of the way things work today. And so I think that requires a lot of discussion and debate. It's an important decision. I have a lot of respect for law enforcement, and of course, don't have any respect for criminals. That's not what this is about. I think it's more about just a completely new way of thinking about things, and we really need to debate that more.
You've got opponents out there, including President Obama, who are saying, well, this would be restricted to one criminal, and if it's going to save lives, isn't that what's more important? Why would you protect criminals? Why would you put innocent people's lives at risk?
Well, I think, like I said, it's a new area. And I think it just warrants more discussion to make sure how is this actually going to work? What kind of precedent is being set and so forth. So I think more debate, more thoughtful debate, I think is how Sundar put it, and I think he put it well, is warranted here.
So if that phone was an Android phone, what would you do? What would you tell the FBI?
I think, well, hard to get into hypotheticals. That's not the case that we're talking about now. But I think Sundar's statement stands. I think we would feel the exact same way, which is that, look, this is a different scenario now, and so let's think this through a little bit more and have that debate.
Edward Snowden has said this will be the most important tech case in a decade. What do you think is at stake here? I mean, these are complex and important issues that you're dealing with and that you have the power to control as the head of Android.
I think it's about privacy, which I think everyone agrees is important. It's easy to talk about these cases in general terms, but the specifics do matter. I'm not familiar with the specifics of this, the San Bernardino Apple situation, so it's hard for me to comment on that. But it does feel like an important area that requires more discussion.
And you can tune into Bloomberg West for my full interview with Hiroshi Lockheimer, Google's Senior Vice President of Android, over the next couple of days. Now, joining me to discuss in more detail are Bloomberg News reporter Tim Higgins in Washington, Wickr co-founder Nico Sell, and Technalysis Research CEO Bob O'Donnell with me here in the studio. But Tim, I want to start with you. Lay it out for us. Who's supporting Apple and who's staying conspicuously silent?
Yeah, no, you've got the trade group here in D.C. that Twitter and Facebook and the likes are all part of, coming out supporting Apple, saying they don't think the government should force them to hack it. Then against it, you're seeing that some of the presidential candidates, Donald Trump, they're very quickly saying, who does Apple think they are, which is adding to kind of the mix of this toxic situation. The debate is just going to get much hotter as we get further towards the general election in November.
What do you guys think?
Well, the thing to think about, and from my perspective, is we have to separate this case from some of the larger questions. I think some of the details of this case are a little bit different. Clearly, encryption and breaking encryption is a big problem, and I think that's something that we absolutely have to avoid. The question, and the reason why I think some people have been not quite as strong on this, is that the specific details of this case aren't really about encryption. There is a degree of having to hack into the system, but not involving encryption. And I think that's an important distinction. It's a very complicated case here. And I think it's be careful that we think about that. And the concern is, by focusing on this one that really isn't about the bigger encryption question, is it unfortunately bringing into a conversation that maybe we weren't quite ready to have yet? And that's the question that remains to be seen.
Now, Nico, you run a messenger service. You've actually had requests by the FBI to build a backdoor into your service. Explain.
And, so I was lucky enough to be educated by the best hackers in the world. And before this FBI request came in, Thomas Cross taught me and many others how to break into a backdoor. And as soon as you've learned that lesson, it's very clear that if you put a hole or circumvent security encryption, then it will be used by the bad guys. We've seen this with Juniper recently. It will be used by the bad guys. So this is really frightening because a couple of things. One, the government is acting more like dictatorship, trying to force Apple to build something that it doesn't want to build. And what it's asking Apple to build is actually a weapon that would be way more destructive to the United States and the entire world economy if it got out. So I think that Tim Cook is standing up more for national security than anyone right now.
So I'll put the same question to you that I put to Hiroshi, the head of Android. If this is saving lives, if this is targeting just one criminal, what's so wrong with that?
I believe that Tim Cook is saving more lives by making this decision. And I think it's the right way to go. What you're hearing from technology companies publicly, maybe they're not supporting this. I spent all day yesterday at Stanford with cybersecurity experts, encryption experts, and everyone agrees that this is a right decision that Tim Cook is making here. Because what the government's asking us for is to build a unicorn, build something that doesn't exist. And if this is made for one, it will be made for others. Both the code will spread, it will also set a legal precedent that will allow other governments to ask for this, as well as more requests with the FBI. So this is a very landmark case here, and we need to make sure to hold our ground.
Bob, what do you make of how, as businesses, these companies have responded or not responded? Hiroshi there said, we would feel exactly the same way, but stopped short of saying we would do exactly the same thing.
Well, and again, I think it boils down, there's a couple issues to think about. Number one is, again, the details of this case aren't necessarily for the release of encryption keys, because that clearly would never pass any kind of muster with anybody. I think the challenge here is, we know that a lot of tech companies have cooperated with authorities and provided information if they've had it. And the question is, where does this particular case fall on that that range of options that are there? Some are arguing that it doesn't quite get to the level of it being a huge issue. Some are saying it is, and I think there's a lot of validity there. The other question, frankly, that Apple has to think about, and I have to give Tim Cook a lot of credit for this stance, is it's going to upset a lot of people. And there are some people for whom Apple is going to be perceived more negatively, and it could have a real-world business impact on them. So, all credit in the world to Tim Cook for having the strength to make what is clearly a difficult situation. Again, the details about whether or not this was the right case to do it on, I think, are still up to debate.
I wonder, Tim, does Apple end up standing alone in the end here, at least publicly?
No, I think you're already seeing some voices of support, and really in the DC world, you're going to see the trade groups and the coalitions will stand up and voice support. That's how they get their funding from Silicon Valley companies, and they'll push money into those groups to help support Apple publicly. Maybe they don't want to be on the front line or the shield, but they will be there behind the scenes.
And Nico, the FBI asked you guys for a backdoor in 2011.
2012.
And 2012, still no backdoor.
And still no backdoor. And it's not that we don't work with law enforcement. And same thing with Apple. They complied with over 70 requests last year alone. It's just that, if you have information, then you can help law enforcement. But asking someone to circumvent their security and build something brand new is not something the U.S. government should do.
Now, just getting a tweet in from Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, who says, we stand with Tim Cook and Apple and thank him for his leadership.
Great. We do too.